Mario versus Napier in recruiting. Who is winning the war so far? We're talking about Mario Cristobal down at Miami, Billy Napier at Florida. Florida's been hot now. I need only direct your attention to a few recruitments, like Jaden Rashada's recruitment recently. That's a quarterback out of Pittsburgh, California. Fools a lot of people. And I remember it feels like 10 years ago, but really it wasn't. His commitment comes down to, among other programs, Miami and Florida, and he commits to Miami. And Florida was all worked up. Man, they thought they had him. I was in this building, I remember, when the announcement came down, I think. And I remember how that was the end of the world, and I remember how there was a lot of talk that Billy Napier is going to get run in recruiting, and Florida just doesn't have it put together like Miami. Miami's going to be a machine, and Florida better get their act together. Now, to put a finer point on that, I came on this show and I said some things that some of you think I should regret. I don't regret it at all. I meant every word I said then, and I think it was valid. Today, I look back on it and think it was valid. And Colin, I didn't give you the clip, but what the clip essentially was me saying, I think Billy Napier's the right guy for the job. I got no doubt about Napier's ability, but what I do think is, I think Florida, as a collective, pun kind of intended, as a collective, are about 2 steps behind in the NIL game. It's fixable, but I think they're about 2 steps behind right now. I believe that was the case at the time. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that Gator collective down there has their act together. How do we know that? Well, last week, all of a sudden, Jaden Rashada, who once broke Florida's heart to commit to Miami, decommitted from Miami and committed to Florida. Now, this is one little salvo. It's not little. I mean, he's a very highly rated quarterback, but it's one example of why there's no skill in me answering this question. The question is, who's winning the war? These are like little micro battles within larger battles that make up the war, which is, by the way, not a war that's going to be won over one recruiting cycle. And also, the sands continue to shift under everyone's feet like every day. Look, here's what I've learned. I put this out when Rashada flipped the other day, and I'll tell you guys again. It's okay to feel good about landing big commitments, by all means. I mean, our folks over on Swamp 24/7 wave the pom-poms. Just be careful how publicly you celebrate, because this will not be the last high-profile flip. You will eventually be victimized by one of these. Anyone who's been around recruiting long enough understands it wasn't for the faint of heart 10 years ago. Now, it will be that times 10 because of what you're allowed to do. And there's really, look, I'm telling you, I know folks who are the most plugged in the world in this recruiting game. The most plugged in the world. Steve Wiltfong, I think, talks to about 200 head coaches a day. It's wild. I have sat there and tried to have dinner with this man, and I can't get in a word because every one of the biggest names in the sport are hitting him up. And so my point is, sometimes even Wiltfong gets taken by surprise by this stuff. And therefore, I'm telling you, there's no way I'm about to tell you who I think's winning a recruiting war. Hey, you know who's winning the recruiting war? Bama. That's who's winning the recruiting war, because they're still lapping everybody. They're probably going to finish overwhelmingly with the #1 class again this cycle. I just think that now it is getting a little more difficult to just go into South Florida and get anyone Nick Saban wants. So overall, for the sport, that's a good thing. I've long maintained my stance on how recruiting in Florida, Texas, and California could level out the playing field more than any playoff expansion. So I'm not going down that road tonight. I don't have time. But I don't think that Miami has made their last move here in this cycle either, let me just say. And so I think that they're going to finish pretty strongly. And here's what you need to remember. This is not the old model. In the old model, you had the old adages, follow the visits, follow the relationships. None of that anymore. None of it. It is who can walk in your room at the 11th hour with the best NIL offer. That's it. That's recruiting. You don't have to feel good about it. I don't particularly love it, but that's recruiting, which means there are no tea leaves to read sometimes. Like, we're coming up on early signing day. We'll be down in Fort Lauderdale, and we'll do blowout coverage of early signing day over on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, which you should be subscribed to, by the way, if you haven't already. We'll have stuff that day, I can guarantee you, that comes out of the blue, and it just stuns everybody. And you got folks, I mean, we got Andrew Ivins and Cooper Pategnan and Singletary, and we got Wilt Fong. I don't even want to name names because I'll forget someone. We have an entire team that's followed kids since they were freshmen in high school, and they get stunned at the last minute. Why? Because that's how NIL recruiting works. So I think that both should be relatively happy with where they are right now. But I think Florida has a particular amount of momentum and a particular amount of confidence because a lot of your greatest concerns back in spring have been eased. You know, I think it kind of mirrors what they're doing on the field right now. They lost to Georgia, and they've played great since then. Got to keep it going, but they started off bumpy in recruiting this cycle. They have performed great since then. So it's going to be really fun to watch. I love that Mike Norvell and Florida State are just left out of that, and yet they're playing better football than anybody in that state right now. Just keep an eye. You never know. The winds of change in NIL recruiting are very, very sudden and very unexpected. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure to leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.